Welcome back to the Resolution Room, the space where we talk about conflict, communication, leadership, accountability, and the human side of how we show up in difficult moments. Today, we are doing something a little different because yesterday was National Video Game Day. And yes, I know some people hear video games and immediately think that's a waste of time. They think of kids ignoring homework, adults yelling in the headsets, or somebody spending 6 hours trying to beat one boss instead of doing laundry. And listen, I'm not here to defend every gaming habit. Like anything else, too much of it can become a problem. But today, I want to talk about the other side of video games. Because if you really pay attention, video games can teach us a lot about conflict resolution. They teach patience, they teach strategy, they teach emotional regulation, they teach teamwork, they teach recovery after failure. They teach you that not every battle is won by attacking harder. Sometimes you win by stepping back, learning the pattern, changing your approach, and trying again. And honestly, that sounds a lot like life. That sounds a lot like leadership. That sounds a lot like conflict. Not every battle is won by attacking harder. Sometimes you win by stepping back, learning the pattern, changing your approach, and trying again. One of the most powerful things video games teaches us is how to fail. And I know that sounds strange because nobody likes failing. Nobody likes seeing game over. Nobody likes losing progress, getting knocked out, missing that jump, losing the match, or getting humbled by a 12-year-old online who apparently has unlimited free time and elite reflexes. But video games normalize failure in a way real life often does not. In a game, failure is not the end of your identity. It's feedback. You lose and then you ask, what happened? Did I rush in too fast? Did I miss the timing? Did I ignore the map? Did I use the wrong tool? Did I underestimate the other person? That is conflict resolution. Because in real conflict, people often treat failure like shame. They lose their temper one time and decide, well, I'm just bad at communication. They avoid one hard conversation and decide, I'm not good at confrontation. They make one mistake as a leader and decide, I'm not built for this. But what if we treat a conflict the way gamers treat a difficult level? You do not throw away the whole game because you failed one mission. You study the mission. You adjust. You come back with a better strategy. In conflict, the same thing applies. Maybe the first conversation did not go well. Maybe your tone was wrong. Maybe you came in too defensive. Maybe you listened to respond instead of listening to understand. That does not mean you are hopeless. It means you have feedback. And feedback is not failure unless you refuse to learn from it. In a game, failure is not the end of your identity. It is feedback, and conflict works the same way. If you've ever played a difficult game, you know the real opponent is not always the boss on the screen. Sometimes the real opponent is your own frustration. You get impatient. You start button mashing. You make sloppy decisions. You ignore what worked 5 minutes ago because now you're irritated. You rush the process because you just want the fight to be over. That is exactly what happens in conflict. When emotions take over, strategy disappears. You might have a good point, but because you're frustrated, it comes out as an attack. You might have a legitimate concern, but because you feel dismissed, you escalate. You might be trying to solve a problem, but because you feel disrespected, now the conversation becomes about tone, ego, and past resentment. Good gamers learn to pause. They learn to reset. They learn that sometimes you have to put the controller down for a minute. That is not weakness. That is regulation. And in conflict, sometimes the strongest thing you can say is, I want to have this conversation, but I need a minute so I can respond in a way that is productive. That pause can save relationships. That pause can save careers. That pause can keep a disagreement from becoming a disaster. Because conflict resolution is not about having no emotions. It's about not letting your emotions drive the whole car. Again, conflict resolution is not about having no emotions. It is about not letting your emotions drive the whole car. A lot of people approach conflict like they are playing on panic mode. They react to every move. Someone sends a tense email, they fire one back. Someone questions them in a meeting, they get defensive. Someone gives feedback, they immediately explain why the other person is wrong. That is reactive conflict. But most good games reward strategy over reaction. You need to know the mission. You need to know the objective. You need to know your resources. And you need to know when to engage and when to wait. Conflict is the same. Before you respond, ask yourself, what is the goal here? Am I trying to be right? Am I trying to be understood? Am I trying to repair trust? Am I trying to set a boundary? Am I trying to solve a problem? Those are all completely different missions, and different missions require different strategies. If the goal is repair, sarcasm is probably not the right weapon. If the goal is clarity, avoidance is not the right strategy. If the goal is accountability, vague hints and passive aggressive comments will not get you there. One of the biggest mistakes we make in conflict is using the wrong tool for the mission. You cannot heal a relationship with a scoreboard. You cannot solve a workplace issue with gossip. You cannot build trust while secretly collecting evidence to use later. Strategy matters. And sometimes the most strategic thing you can do is slow down and ask, what outcome am I actually trying to create? One of the biggest mistakes we make in conflict is using the wrong tool for the mission. Now, let's talk about multiplayer games. Because if you want to see communication problems in real time, play a team based game with people who do not know how to communicate. Everybody wants to be the hero. Nobody wants to play support. Somebody runs off alone and gets wiped out, then blames the team. Somebody refuses to share resources. Somebody ignores the objective because they are chasing personal stats. Sound familiar? That happens in workplaces too. It happens in leadership teams. It happens in departments. It happens in families. It happens in community organizations. Everybody says they want the team to win, but not everybody is playing the objective. In conflict resolution, this matters because conflict often grows when people are focused on their individual scoreboard instead of the shared mission. In a workplace, the objective might be patient care, client service, employee safety, compliance, or operational stability. But if one person is focused only on being right, one person is focused only on protecting their image, and one person is focused on not being blamed, the mission gets lost. Great teams communicate clearly. They call out what they see. They ask for help when they are overwhelmed. They do not wait until the whole mission fails to say, actually, I did need support. And they understand roles. Not everybody needs to be the damage dealer. Not everybody needs to be the strategist. Not everybody needs to lead every moment. Sometimes you are support. Sometimes you are the person creating space. Sometimes you are the person gathering information. Sometimes you're the one keeping everybody calm. And if you do your role well, the whole team gets better. Everybody says they want the team to win, but not everybody is playing the objective. Watch out for that. Every gamer knows there are patterns. Bosses have patterns, opponents have patterns, levels have patterns, even sports games have patterns. You start recognizing tendencies. This person always rushes. This boss always attacks after a brief pause. This team always collapses when pressured. This level always punishes impatience. Conflict has patterns too. Some people shut down when they feel criticized. Some people escalate when they feel ignored. Some teams avoid issues until they become emergencies. Some leaders correct after one bad experience. Some employees hear every question as an accusation. If you want to resolve conflict, you have to learn the pattern. Not to manipulate people, not to win, but to understand what is actually happening. Because many conflicts are not about the issue on the surface. The surface issue might be a schedule, an email, a tone, a decision, a policy, or a meeting. But the deeper pattern might be fear, lack of trust, unclear expectations, poor communication, inconsistent accountability, or people just feeling unheard. When you can identify the pattern, you can stop acting surprised every time the same problem shows up wearing a different outfit. That is where growth happens. Instead of saying, why does this keep happening? You start asking, what pattern keeps producing this outcome? That is leadership. That is emotional intelligence. That is conflict resolution. Stop acting surprised every time the same problem shows up wearing a different outfit. Here's another underrated lesson from video games: boundaries. Every game has rules. You have health limits, time limits, resource limits, map limits, cooldowns, consequences. You cannot just do anything you want and expect the game to work. Relationships are the same way. Workplaces are the same way. Families are the same way. A lot of conflict happens because boundaries are unclear, inconsistent, or ignored. Somebody thinks they can talk to people however they want because they are stressed. Somebody thinks being busy gives them permission to be disrespectful. Somebody thinks because they are a good performer, accountability should not apply to them. Somebody thinks silence means agreement. Boundaries protect the mission. They tell people what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, and what happens next. But here's the important part: boundaries are not just punishments. Healthy boundaries are instructions for how we stay in relationship with each other. In a game, the boundary is not there to ruin the experience. It is there to create structure. In real life, a boundary might sound like, I am willing to discuss this, but not if we are yelling. I can support you, but I cannot do the work for you. I am open to feedback, but I need it to be specific. I want to repair this, but we have to be honest about what happened. That is not being difficult. That is creating the conditions for healthier interaction. Boundaries are not just punishments. Healthy boundaries are instructions for how we stay in relationship with each other. One of my favorite things about video games is progression. You level up, you unlock skills, you earn better tools, but usually you do not become great all at once. You improve slowly. Your reaction time gets better. Your timing gets better. Your understanding gets better. You stop making the same mistakes. You start seeing options you did not see before. That is what personal growth looks like. That's what becoming better at conflict looks like. It is not always dramatic. Sometimes growth is catching yourself before you send the email. Sometimes growth is asking one more question before you assume bad intent. Sometimes growth is saying, let me think about it, instead of immediately defending yourself. Sometimes growth is apologizing without adding a paragraph about why the other person made you do it. Sometimes growth is simply admitting, I handled that poorly. That is leveling up. And I think we need to normalize small progress because a lot of people quit working on themselves because they do not see instant transformation. But games remind us that progress compounds. You keep showing up, you keep learning, you keep adjusting. And eventually, the thing that used to defeat you becomes something you know how to handle. Now, I do want to be balanced. Video games can be positive, but they can also become avoidance. Anything that helps us decompress can become unhealthy if we use it to disappear from our responsibilities, relationships, emotions, or problems. So the question is not just, are video games good or bad? The better question is, how am I using them? Am I using games to relax, connect, learn, and reset? Or am I using them to avoid conversations I need to have? Am I playing because I enjoy it or because I don't want to deal with what is happening in my life? The same question applies to a lot of things. Work can become avoidance. Social media can become avoidance. Being helpful can even become avoidance. Staying busy, avoidance. So enjoy the game, but never abandon the real mission. The real mission is still your relationships, your growth, your peace, your responsibilities, your ability to communicate and repair. Games can teach us skills, but we still have to use those skills when the controller is down. Enjoy the game, but do not abandon the mission. So, again, in honor of National Video Game Day, I want us to rethink the way we talk about gaming because many video games are not just about escape. Maybe they are also about practice. Practice failing and trying again. Practice staying calm under pressure. Practice communicating with a team. Practice learning patterns. Practice respecting boundaries. Practice choosing strategy over reaction. And maybe the reason games connect with so many people is because they give us something real life often does not: a clear mission, immediate feedback, and another chance. But here's a challenge. In real life, you do not always get a restart button. You do not always get to reload from the last checkpoint. You do not get unlimited attempts with people. So the goal is to take the lesson before the damage is permanent. Pause before you react. Listen before you assume. Repair before resentment hardens. Set boundaries before bitterness grows. Ask for help before the mission fails. Because conflict resolution is not about being perfect. It is about being willing to learn the level you are in. It is about recognizing the pattern. It is about choosing a better strategy. It is about understanding that sometimes the real win is not defeating the other person. Sometimes the real win is saving the relationship, protecting your peace, and becoming someone who can handle hard moments without becoming harmful. So, whether you're a gamer, a casual player, or a parent trying to understand why your kid or young adult or old adult loves games, or someone who has not picked up a controller since the old school days, there's something to learn here. The next time you play, pay attention. How do you respond when you fail? How do you communicate when the team is struggling? How do you handle frustration? How do you adjust when your first plan doesn't work? Because how we play can tell us a lot about how we live. And how we handle pressure in small moments can prepare us for the bigger ones. This has been the Resolution Room. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and remember, sometimes the best way to win the conflicts is to stop playing against each other and start playing the objective. If this episode made you think of your favorite game, your worst rage quit moment, or a conflict you handled differently after learning the pattern, share this episode with somebody who needs it. And if you are posting today, ask your audience this: what video game taught you the most about patience, teamwork, or strategy? I'll see you in the next episode of The Resolution Room.